Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Tosoff.
And I'm Jody Prosnick, and we are 2/3 of the Music Education Hub Music Arts Collective. The other 1/3 is our executive director, Francesca Fung, who is unfortunately not able to be with us today. She may be hopping on in a bit and managing the chat. So please say hello in the message if you're here in the chat. You can let us know where you're chiming in from, and so we can say hello and acknowledge where you're coming in. So Amanda, here we are. This is episode 18.
18. I can't believe we've done 18 of these
Can't believe it.
interviews. It's been super, super fun. For those of you who maybe haven't joined us before, we've been doing this series, this live stream series since 2 Septembers ago now. And we've had some wonderful guests. We've had Celine Peterson, Lila Bialy, Rini Rosnes, Sharantha Bedegay, so many wonderful guests. And so if you haven't seen these past live streams that we've done, please go to our YouTube and you can watch them all there. There's some great nuggets of information and inspiration for sure. You can also check out our website because we do have workshop videos and upcoming workshops and recent workshops that we've done on topics from improvisation to composition to playing piano in an ensemble. What's our workshop that's coming up next, Jody? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm really excited about the next workshop. I'm doing an improvisation workshop to talk about how to play beautiful melodies over chord progressions. So how to connect your melodies throughout chord progressions. I use 3 different outlines 1, 2, and 3. And it's a real step-by-step way of practicing something very tangible and concrete that will definitely help you with your improvisation and composition as well. So it gives you good strategies for making beautiful voice-meeting melodic melodies over chord progressions. So that's the topic. And if you come and join live, you'll be able to watch the 1.5-hour webinar. It's about just under 1.5 hours with a little bit of Q&A at the end. And then, of course, you'll get some beautiful PDFs and access to the video, which will be chopped up into chapters. So you can revisit outline 1, practice that, outline 2, outline 3. So that's coming up 2 Sundays from now on the 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific time and 2 p.m. Eastern time. So please go to our website and you can sign up. It's only $20. It's a total steal, you guys. Amazing.
Yeah, we always end up jam-packing these workshops with so much great information. It's almost like a video textbook, I think we like to sometimes say, because there's so much great information there. So I've actually put the link in the chat, so you can go check that out later. So today, our special guest, we're really excited to have an amazing pianist, composer, and educator and radio host, Thomas Francis. Thomas is, I actually had not met him before we both were hired at Humber College. We're new full-time faculty at Humber College, and it's been so fun to get to know him a little bit. I jokingly said before we started that I haven't had like a real conversation with him. It's been all about rubrics and assignments and stuff we've had to do for work. So I'm really, really excited to chat with him today. We're going to have a blast for sure.
This is also my first time meeting Thomas, although I've heard of him and a lot about him through his work, primarily as a radio host for Jazzcast.ca. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to him. And he's a really interesting a scholar around Black American music and how it's all connected to the same beautiful roots, the roots. Literally, I'm a bass player. It's all connected to the roots, man. And the beat, the heartbeat.
Yes.
Amazing. So before we bring Thomas to the stage, Amanda, why don't you tell us a little bit about his background?
Absolutely. So Thomas is quite a versatile pianist. He's from Toronto and based in Toronto. And he studied at Humber College, where, of course, he's now full-time faculty, so it's like full circle. He also did his master's at York University, where he focused on composition and also did research on the relationship between jazz and hip-hop music. He's performed with wonderful artists, some icons like Kelly Lee Evans, George St. Kitts, Alexis Barrow, and many, many more across many scenes here in Toronto, which we'll get into later. He also leads a hip hop jazz ensemble, Thomas Francis and Friends, and hosts a show on Jazzcast.ca called The Jazz Gene. And I have to say, I was tuning in yesterday. It was airing yesterday, and I think it airs on Tuesday. He can tell us a little bit more about that in a second. But it was so enjoyable, so good, and so informative, and just enjoyable to listen to. So definitely check that out. And we'll definitely be posting some links for where to get more information about Thomas, where to listen, and to Jazzcast.ca, of course, as well. But I think let's welcome Thomas to the stage.
Yay.
Drum roll.
There he is.
Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, nervous, and good.
I hear you. I always tell my students, like, what if we're not nervous for things like performances or interviews or whatnot, it's a problem. We should be nervous, right?
Yeah.
Excited.
Yeah. One of my teachers, Karen Burke, used to say, Professor Karen Burke of York University, she'd say, like, if you're nervous, that means you care. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's just energy. It's awesome energy rising up of like anticipation and curiosity. So it's amazing.
Excitement.
Well, we are super thrilled to have you here today. Thank you for agreeing to come and chat with us, and we're
Of
looking
course.
forward to robust conversation about kinds of interesting things. And I'm also like out here on the coast. I'm excited to share you with the west coast of Canada, and let our folks out here know all about you and what you're up to these days. Canada is such a
Okay.
big country.
It really is.
It's like so big. It's hard for us to connect. So yay for the internet.
Absolutely. I know. And I'm from Vancouver. Of course, that's where I know Jody so well, but and then I'm based in Toronto, but I'm so sad when we don't know, the two scenes don't collaborate more. There needs to be more of that for sure.
Yeah. I wish it was a little bit more like the States in that way, where like
Yeah.
the collaboration was more, cross country. But I guess that's we have a little bit of this like technology to help with that at the very least, right? So that's good.
Definitely. That's what's been so fun about doing these for sure. So, shall we begin? So we always like to start by just getting a little bit of info about our guest's early story. Like, what's your musical background, and how did you discover jazz and decide it was your path, and really that it was your pathway to many genres of music. So tell us a little bit about your early story.
Sure. So, both my parents are from Trinidad, and that means that they love listening to two things: calypso and soca, but also really good R&B, like selective R&B. You know what I mean? So like that was kind of like my hodgepodge there, where like it's just a bunch of music. Christmas time comes around, and you're listening to praying music, which is like 12/8 of like Spanish influenced music. You know what I mean? And you learn how to scat because that's how they sing. They don't use like the words are there, but like a lot of the time if they're imitating other instruments, like that's just what it is. So that's like, from the womb into the world, that's my house, right? And then my parents signed me up for Humber College community music program. And you're doing music and movement, so you're doing nursery rhymes, you're bouncing the ball, that kind of thing. But when you're 6, you start piano, and that's when you get into classical music. And my piano teacher, Luisa Fernandez, man, she's awesome. She pushed me so hard to do a lot of like harder music because she knew that I could do it. But I was a lazy kid, so like I didn't want to. And she just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. But I loved classical music. I loved playing that stuff. And that's like my foundation of playing. But then like 2 years later, the community music program decided to do an experiment where they wanted to see if kids like at 8 years old could play jazz. So they kind of pushed us into this ensemble together. And I think it was on Wednesdays, we'd be like learning how to play jazz music. But it was like an intuitive thing where like the feel was cool, the songs were cool. And like, I'm sharing these ideas with like other kids my age, and like I still, we're still in touch. Like we all still connect still. And my older sister was in that group too. So like we had something to bond over. She was 11 at the time, and she's like listening to, John Coltrane and like, like, I mean, just trying to sound like him and stuff like that. But that's my musical background, and I didn't know that it wasn't cool until like, you get out of that bubble and you're back. Like it's the '90s, so like everyone's listening to like LL Cool J and Will Smith, and like, it's just they're naming all these hip hop tunes and hip hop people. I'm just like, I don't know what that is. I know some of it, but like not as deeply as the other kids. But that's jazz was the I think jazz was the pathway because it was the thing that made me feel good when I played it, and it's like I was able to use what I learned from my classical upbringing and my very West Indian household upbringing and rhythms and stuff to like express yourself, and my ears are big, so like you're hearing things, and but yeah, that's pretty much how that works.
There's so
I,
much about that story that's amazing. Amanda, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to
We're
say the
both
same
like,
thing. I
mm,
just love. I mean, specifically, I love just that you've kept in touch with those early friends that you played music with in community music. That's like so that bonding experience is just so special, and I just love hearing about that. Didn't mean to cut you off, Jody. Please.
no, I was going to say exactly the same thing. And the other thing about that story that speaks to me are some big meta concepts. One is the idea of bringing all these facets of who you are together and finding a space for all these different sort of siloed potentially like what it's like at home, and then learning about classical music or notation and all that, and finding a space where that can connect together in community. And that is the magic, the trinity of awesome, right? Where you can bring the lived experience, skill acquisition in community. That's it. So
You
you
said
you
it far better
basically,
than I did. That's great.
no, you absolutely said it, Hummus. All these, you guys know, the teacher and us, we have to basically mirror back what the student is already, the gorgeousness that you're not a student, but you mirror
No,
back
no, yeah,
what people are telling you, and it's
yeah.
always awesome. So no,
Mhm.
it's that's so beautiful. I also wanted to say, like, out here we've just started I work for the Vancouver Symphony School, and run their community music model, and one of the things I love about it, we do have an earlier years, and I have this little junior jazz group, and they're grades 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's the perfect age to get everything going, because it's
Yeah.
just they're so in it. It's just
Mhm.
the earlier the better.
Mhm.
Plus the skill acquisition through learning about their instrument is also an important piece too. So beautiful, amazing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I am super interested in chatting about and love about you is that you are like super versatile. So you play in a ton of different ensembles with a ton of different people, jazz, pop, soul, funk. And I think you've even done some country music, disco. Yes. So I think that is like, I think in a way, this your career and all the facets of it is a real beautiful model for what your life in music can be when you again get this core stuff together and then kind of can slip through different genres and using that skill set. So I just want to chat a little bit about that. Um, so the question we had are, how can we prepare young people to be able to do this well? And how did you break into the different scenes? So how did you like kind of let people know that, hey, I'm open to playing in country bands and I love hip hop? Like, how did that happen for you? Two questions. Why don't we start with the first? Like, how do we prepare students to kind of be open and capable to be able to flip through all these genres?
The the way to answer that question is actually to
Mm.
answer the second question. Um,
Okay.
and there's two things, or at least I think so. Hopefully, I'll remember by the time I get there. To answer the second question, you just have to show up, right? So
Mm.
a lot of the times I found that um, folks, especially growing up, like if I wanted to be part of something, I literally just showed up and I just kept showing up.
Mm,
And people will recognize you at some point, or people will see that you are consistent. But also too, you have to be pretty active when you're there, right? So if you're there at, for example, an easy one is like the Rex Jam, right? If you go every week, if you go up to play every week, people will be curious to know who you are, what you do, and you start making connections, right? So when that's how I met. Actually, that's how I met Maya Chilton. I don't know if you remember, who she is. She's amazing. I went to Rex Jam with my friend Alex Sakitz, and we were there, and we'd been to the Rex, for different shows and stuff like just hanging. But like, there was this one time we were at the jam and we were playing. Larnell was on kit. I remember that, and like Alex was obviously playing bass and playing keys. Botosh was there. A few people, like people were passing through there, and after the kind of set or the song was over, like, hey, what's your name? And that's kind of like how that starts, right? And it happens with different things. You show up to, sessions, you show up to jams, even if it's non-music related, like you show up to a party, or you're just in the room and you contribute in a meaningful kind of way. That's how I went from playing this jazz thing to playing this R&B thing to playing this disco thing to playing this like country thing. You know what I mean? Like it's just, if you do well in one thing, then people just assume that you will do well in other things, especially if
mm,
you demonstrate that time and again. To be able to prepare for different genres, it ends up to that, like if you say yes, like you just say yes, you don't go playing exactly how you would play. You go
mm,
exactly, like you go prepared. Like if you're like, for me, like the big scare, not a big scare, but like playing country for Emily Reed was a lot of fun. And like I had to find like my inner like Gaither gospel playing. You know what I mean? Like just because like it's stuff that you hear growing up. Like I don't know, like stuff I've heard growing up. I grew up playing a lot more like Pentecostal, like modern gospel music, but then like obviously there's this other side where like the stuff's a little bit different, but it's very much the same. So you have to like pull from those aesthetics and apply them the best you can, and it's like the best that you can, because that's how you get jobs, and that's how you continue to get the call. So any genre, it's like even if you're uncomfortable, you could say yes all day long. Just make sure that you do the homework. Like grab your
yeah.
playlist, listen to some stuff, lift some things, try to add those isms into what you would do, and just be like the best. Like if you know that what you're doing isn't your best, like try even harder. Like do more,
Mm.
practice more, lift more. There's always so much that you can do, and that's, I feel, how you can go across genres. Because yeah, it's a lot of talking, but yes, that's how you go across genres: showing up and then preparing your butt off for everything. You know.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I'm curious. I have a little an
Yeah.
extra question about that. And we talked a little bit before we went on about sort of personalities, and some people are more extroverted, some people are a little more introverted. Are you more comfortable in sort of an accompanying role than being a band leader? Like, do you really enjoy showing up and serving the music, or do you like being a band leader, or is it depends? Like, what's your relationship to that? Because I know, like for me, there's certain people in town out here that are just really happy being a side person on a lot of stuff. Like that's, you could almost say like a guy like Dave Restivo in Toronto is notoriously just a fantastic side person. He doesn't perform as a leader all that often, although a bit more now. But, we had conversations about that he was happy to just serve different bands in different ways and be that guy. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious where you land with that. And if you've thought about it, I'm sorry, we're heading off our questions a little bit, but
No, that's good.
I'm
No,
very
that's
curious
great.
about that because I
That's
think
actually a really good
sometimes
question.
we pressure people like you need to be like, make an album and be out there and da 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 da. And maybe there's an alternative pathway for people who just like to quietly serve in a different way and do the homework and find great pride in like deepening the practice in whatever song or band that they're asked to be in. So do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think that, well, how do I put this? This is a long answer. I'm going to try and make it a short answer. Okay, so I actually really enjoy being a side person, like just getting hired to be the, was it, no, something about a gun. Anyway, but sorry, I can't remember the expression, but basically, like, I
Hired gun?
really, so hired gun, thank you, hired gun, yes, right. I actually really enjoy that. It's great because you do the job and you go home. You don't have to think about anything else. Um, and but it's kind of like what Creed Bratton says on The Office. Like, you have a lot of fun being a follower of a cult, but like what much more fun being a follower. But like you make either more money or there's more opportunities as a leader, right, of a cult, right? Not to, Creed, man. Anyway,
I love
but it's
that show.
true. But
So
it's
good.
but it's true. Like, so I've led bands since I was 12, like talking to adults, because, at some point, like the knowledge that you gain from doing all of these yes gigs that you take compound, right? So you know how things work. But if you don't want to trouble yourself, you just say yes as a side and you're good to go. But it's a lot of fun leading bands. Like, for example, like I remember at one point I was MD of the Spice Girls tribute band, and that was fun. Like that's just fun. Like, you're learning all of the music that, for personally, like it was music I've hated when I was a kid because, like, guys aren't supposed to like the Spice Girls. You're in grade 3 or 4 or whatever, and stuff comes out. You're supposed to be a man about things. But the music is like, I'm older and I'm listening to this stuff. This music's great. So like I find myself like, consolidating my boyhood and being like, man, you're totally wrong. Like, dude, you have no idea what good music is. You're missing out, and like the parts are good and like you're learning the isms of the genre, and like by the time you play like with such strong musicians, strong vocalists, like the vocalists that actually did the shows were phenomenal, right? Like the first iteration was with like Janae Olivia and Susie Wild, like different people that just, Catherine Miriam, like it worked. Anika too. I don't remember her last name. Robert Johnson, right? Like I think it was Anika Johnson also, but like great, strong female presence, and like the music was on point, choreo was on point. So by the time you get to other pop gigs, like I'm working for like Dan Tulowski, or if I'm working with like Miles Costello, like you kind of know how it goes in terms of like putting a pop gig together, because I had to learn on the fly of what that meant, because there were such strong leadership qualities all around, but also too, like you show up to another job that's similar, different energy, but like your knowledge is already there and you've already learned a lot, and
so knowledge transfer to being a leader. I think Amanda and I would tend to agree with that. Hey, all of our years of playing in other people's bands, you learn a lot by playing other people's music, good, bad, and ugly, like a lot, so that when you apply that learning to your own art, it's awesome. Actually, it's like a library of information, then reimagine in your own way. So that's interesting. So I just love that. Oh, Amanda, did I jump on your questions? I did jump on your
Yes, you
questions.
did. That's okay.
So you can ask about being an educator, because you guys get to work together. I'm living vicariously through you too.
Yes. Okay. So the next question has to do with education. I mentioned earlier that that Thomas and I were both recently hired full-time at Humber College, which we're both really excited about and having a blast with our courses this year, and having fun brainstorming together, and it's been super fun. So I think this year, Thomas, you're teaching piano, of course, improvisation, listening and analysis, which is sort of like a jazz history learn how to listen class for the intro to jazz and commercial music program.
Yeah.
And of course, I've heard a little bit about this wonderful new course that you're developing for, I think, for the wider Humber community. It's open to music and non-music students, I believe, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about this? Because it sounds super exciting. It's so exciting. I want to take it. So hopefully I can come and watch sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm right now, it's not open to music students. Like,
oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I wish, right? Because it's like, anyway, I'll get there. I want them to, but
yes.
it's a course that I proposed that got accepted called Hip Hop: A Study of Blackness. And the cool thing about this course is that it's a survey course, which is what I've already done, what I already started doing with history of jazz. And it's what I do with history, not really so much listening analysis, but definitely with history of jazz, like teaching that breadth course. Mm-hmm. So I'm always interested in teaching from a post-jazz perspective. I'm always interested in the connections between jazz and hip hop. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to make sure to I want to explore a little bit more like of this, past the 1980s and like see what's going on. Like, how did this stuff start? Like, who are the archetypes? Like what aesthetics do they draw? What did technology save? How do they, like, for example, if your school doesn't have a band program, like the more affluent, class schools that are like across redlining zones and such, like, what do you do with it? What do you do with a record player? What can you do with a record player to make it your instrument? Right? Like those kinds of things like that we get to talk about. We get to talk about, if I'm looking at an album for a semester, how do I get to break down each track? If I'm looking at These Walls from Kendrick Lamar, do I get to talk about Brenda Had a Baby from Tupac, or like Sing About Me, I'm Dying? Do I get to talk about Sugar Hill Gang and like The Message? Like, yeah, absolutely. And like each one of those set of lyrics gives like a perspective of what it's like to live in that time from people that live there and people that even live there now. It's totally relevant. You know what I mean? And this is like American music, so I'm aware that there's another hip hop course being taught at X University. That's
so the name that shall not be named.
Right. I'm aware, but and that focuses more on like The Weeknd and Drake, right? And the podcast that jump started that whole course is so good. This is not a Drake podcast. Dalton Higgins, oh my gosh, so good, so good. But this one's like, I'm looking at American artists. I'm looking at how this stuff was built, where it's going, relationship. I know I won't be able to cram everything. So but it's something that it's a course that needs to be taught. It's a course that needs to open the minds of a lot of people in terms of, the most popular genre of music in the world from a group of people that aren't even half of the world population. Like, that's insane, so like, we need to get to the bottom of this. Like, what is this all about? So that's what this course is,
There's so much I love about that. Ooh. So here's a question about that.
Sure.
History, music history in particular, for a long time had been taught from this point of view of like, separate the art from the person, separate the art from the lived experience, and look at it as an artifact and analyze as an artifact. And what I'm noticing is that because I taught history for a while at one of the universities out here, that when I would bring in the narrative of the practitioner, like, how can you talk about a love supreme without talking about like John Coltrane's history, right? Or like, you can't, you could, but when I bring in the narrative and talk about, what was going on for him at that time and what the music was a representation of, you listen way, and also I feel like it invites everyone in the room to create from that place too, that your lived experience, that your narrative, that who you are, and when you walk in the world, that how you walk in the world is the raw material. Like what is around you in your space is art. Everything you're living, you're a walking piece of art. And look at these people who really tapped into that. Look at the art that they shared with us space. So I'm curious, like, have you had any um challenge around shifting away from that sort of art as artifact, and bringing in, as you would say, looking at this lyric from a very um, bringing in context in a really deep way. And like, I'm just curious, was there a point at which you went, yeah, I need to go here because this just feels right? Did you have some mentors who helped invite you into that? Was this just something you kind of like, I need to just go here because this is just needs to happen? It's not happening and it needs to. We need to talk about this in these academic spaces. So lots of
Wow.
questions there. I know we go deep here. It's never a shallow thing.
No, it's
But
great. So how do I? Okay, so let's see. I feel as though I'll take like Bebop for example. I was actually talking to my class the other day, and I asked the question like, "Do most of you feel anxiety about playing Bebop?" The answer is yes. Most people say yes because they feel as though they need to sound like that or have that particular sound in order to be considered great, right? And it's like theory has become the knowledge of theory and the use of theory has become such a phallic way of demonstrating knowledge rather than it being like a resource to express yourself, right? And I can't like and that's not how I want to like express hip hop. I don't want to express it in that way. I don't know 1,000 raps. I don't know like, I can't rhyme off things off the cuff. Like, but you know what? Like I really love studying history. And if there are things that people that I need to dive into, it's because, you want to find out what inspired their mode of expression. So, like I was saying earlier, if I'm talking about Q-Tip and Q-Tip as a child didn't have a band program, even though he was like really into music, right? So that wasn't there, but he toyed around with a record player. And, when I don't know if you had this when you were a kid, but like when you had a record player or when something came on the radio, you had like your tape deck and like you would just record, like you press record and
yes,
play to like record what was going on in the
yes,
radio. So they did the same thing with like their record player. Like if there was a breakdown that happened, like an instrumental section that they thought was great, they would just hit record and the thing would be like maybe 4 seconds long. They'd stop it. They'd have to put it back, and they'd have to make sure it lines up correctly, and like do it all like super manual. But then they have like this 2-minute deck, and then you put poetry to it to express yourself. You know what I mean? And whether you're rapping in the style of the dozens, which is like, to show off what kind of bravado you have, or like to make fun of another person, or even just to, you're being more conscious, like whatever, it's a style of expression, but it came from without, right? Like it came from,
yeah,
and it's like you have to be able to talk about, bebop in that way too. It's, these musicians, their music was being stolen all the time. They made things from without. They went to Mary Lou Williams' apartment and she sat down with like, Thelonious Monk and other great musicians, and they talked music, they talked theory. And at night, they would go to Minton's and they would play their ideas and they would write from without. And it's just like, if you're a student and you're wanting to learn how to play this wonderful, wonderfully expressive, creative style of music, Western music, it's like you got to come from it with an approach of playing without. Like you don't have it, you want to learn how to do it. What makes you want, what's motivating you to want to recreate this sound? If you're doing it because you want to show off how awesome you are, you want to show off your ego, it's fine, it'll sound like that, like it will 100% sound that way. But if it's, if you're connecting, here's another TV show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Zuko at one point lost his firebending, right? And it's like he was using his firebending from a place of hatred. So he had to go to the original dragons and learn how to come from it from a place of love, right? And all of a sudden he got his fire back, right? Same thing, right? Like you have to be able to play this music with some kind of love where it doesn't matter whether or not, you know, you have the knowledge. I've heard robots play bebop for days. So have you, I'm sure, showing up to gigs and like you're hearing these, you know, not to make fun of sax players, but you're hearing people just run up and down all of the Parker licks all day long, but it doesn't mean anything if it's like it's not you. So that is honestly, Jody, that is a big challenge trying to not teach from a point of view that's like completely institutionalized, but more from a place that's more humane. It's very like, you know, and like if I prepare, like let's say I finish preparing this course because it's not finished yet, and I have to pass it off, will this person be able to do that? You know, like will the information anyway, that's another thing.
Well,
Sorry.
that's another conversation because
Yeah.
I hear this. So, you know, my argument, what I think is that the reason why this hasn't been brought into institution is because it's messy.
Yeah.
It's a messy, it's a messy conversation, and you have to be okay with mess when we're teaching, you know, passing tone scales and how to, I mean, Amanda and I, we teach that. It's, you have to, you know, that's good stuff to know, and technique and all that stuff. But I would say that when you do get into drug addiction or people that are creating with what's in front of them and from a place of poverty often, you know, and lack. So, but how do you find that? How do you have the conversation around, but look what the creativity that emerges from this. It's crazy. It's not coming from a place of privilege and I can just go buy whatever I want and get the best people. And often in our music schools, you know, let's face it, a lot of the kids who end up are coming from massive privilege and have had access to like the, so when you look at hip hop music and where it came from and how it developed, that innate human urge to create something beautiful from whatever is in front of you is something we need to be championing and talking about constantly, because otherwise there's this assumption that, oh, person over here who plays really well is so amazing. Well, you know, they're at the point from here to there to make that amazing thing is like here. But if you look over here and look at this art being made over here, the point from here to here, oh, you can't see my arm, but is so it's like let's make monuments to those folk because quite frankly, you know, like talk about the human spirit, the capacity to the phoenix rising. I mean, come on.
Yes.
So this is why I'm like a resident cheerleader, but this is why I'm so excited about you and bringing these stories into the academy, because I think that it's a game changer, because we all have challenges, and even the kids who come from more privilege, they have stuff that they have to pretend they're not dealing with because they, you know, you know what I mean? Like, but that's the good stuff. Like, you know, right from the mess. Life is messy. Creativity is messy. It's not, you know. And actually the beautiful stuff comes from the mess. That's the good stuff. It's the fertilizer, literally.
Literally, like
it literally is the fertilizer. Amazing.
I love that when you were talking about like without, for example, like I love martial arts movies. Like martial arts movies are like my jam. I can do that all day. Jackie
you are
Chan
an interesting person. Holy moly. Loving
like,
this.
No, it's like, okay, so I mean, if we're talking about art really, and it's like if you're creating art from without, it's kind of like, or you know, you're trying to express yourself. One thing I absolutely love about martial arts is the idea that certain styles have a purpose. You know, Tai Chi is about balance. You know, so it's like you can be 4'2" and flip someone that's 9 feet tall because like balance, right? If that person doesn't have it, then like you win, you know, or if it's like, you know, monkey style, snake style kung fu, that's, you know, a little boxed up cookie cutter for like film, but the idea that kung fu is like either a reflection of nature, like Shaolin monks, like they look like they do the most amazing things, and they do because they discipline their body. They don't need anything else. They don't have TVs. They don't need like phones. You know, if you're training to do the martial art or you're learning like kung fu, you're doing it without the distractions, you know? And it's hard. Like if you're in a music school and like you're there to learn, the hardest part is all the distractions. Both of you know this.
Oh yeah.
So many.
You need to practice for an assignment, but like there's a jam happening. Do you need to go to the jam? Yes, because like you want to make connections and stuff, but no, because like you have that assignment which will make you better. Like, there's all of a sudden you have to like kind of tai chi the thing. Like, how do you balance that out, right? Like, it's just having none of these distractions and like really figuring out who you are, how to express this thing, what to use in order to express it, like what means. Like martial arts looks like dancing, like very fancy dancing. That's why Crouching Tiger is like one of my favorite movies. It's so beautiful. Like the artistry in that film alone, and it's 20 years old, like 21 years old, I think, and it's like still some of the most beautiful martial arts I've ever seen. Like, and it's just like that's art. It's the way that things were expressed. It's from nothing. A lot of the times it looks like they're using nothing, which they are. Like someone will use a bamboo stick and outwit somebody with like a giant sword that can, you know what I mean? Like, because it's not about the weapon, it's about like how you use your body.
Yes.
Your body.
Yeah.
So interesting. It's a wonderful metaphor. It's a really wonderful mirror of what we're trying to do, I guess. That's it's a really
and I love these
amazing.
connections between different arts because it really is all connected. It's always such a great reminder. You can learn so much from checking out other arts. Like as you're talking about these martial arts, I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting. I wonder again, how can you take that into your playing, into your everything, your life? So,
there you go.
That's it. So interesting.
Well, I mean, even just playing an instrument and the use of gravity. Like talk about this with bass players all the time. It's like I'm 5'2". I'm like a tiny woman, and I know we haven't met. I look super tall on camera, but I'm not. And I play a tall instrument. So people are like, "Oh, wow, you're actually pretty short." But the way you have to get good sound, it's the same with piano. It's just let gravity do the work for you. You just let. It's like the amount of effort you need, and then no more. Like otherwise, you're overexerting and you aren't actually gaining anything from it. So I think that it's almost like we're like a martial arts of fine motor martial artists.
Ooh,
In a way. Woo, there you go. You can steal that one. # fine motor martial arts.
That's a good one.
I like that.
Hand ninjas. Like I don't know. Finger ninjas. Anyway.
That's funny. I like that.
Amazing. Well, maybe for our last, maybe one more question, if you have time, Thomas.
We got time. Yeah.
So just sort of building off of the history and your passion for history and sharing stories and teaching. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your show on Jazzcast.ca, the Jazz Gene.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So
what's that about? What's the concept?
So the Jazz Gene is, as always, a metaphor, because I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and she's a biologist, and she's awesome, and like minors in chem. She's amazing. And she was telling me about her thesis, which has to do with cancer cells. She was telling me like how cancer cells, break down or don't break down and totally multiply, and like their life cycle and all that. And we got into talking about DNA. She told me that there are two elements in DNA. One called the physical element and the functional element. And she's telling me how they work, and I don't remember any of that now, but that really caught my attention because I didn't know. It seemed to really inform or like spark this idea that jazz, in comparison to a lot of modern musics like funk, R&B, funk, rock and roll before funk, like hip hop, like it kind of. Sorry, I'm trying to put it in chronological on the fly. Bad idea. Anyway, but the actual gene itself is like there are inherent traits in each of these things that you can like come back to. So, for example, if we're looking at Louis Jordan, who got fired from the Chick Webb band because he was trying to create his own band. So he was trying to steal Ella Fitzgerald and the whole thing. Like, it didn't work out for him as like a jazz player, but he was a showman and had really good ideas about how to like liven up music. So they call him the king of the jukebox because, certain songs like Caledonia and such that he wrote.
Caledonia.
Like, right. Or
Mhm.
Choo Choo Boogie, like that was him,
Mhm.
right? And that's early R&B, right? But it still had a lot of that jazz influence, and that's there. And it's like, okay, well, what physical elements are there? Physical, I relate to more rhythmic elements. So there's still swing, that's a thing, but the major and like those groups of like triplets that are still kind of involved in there. But also too, like the big one is the backbeat. Like that exists in every facet of like branches of black music, like that 2 and 4 for whatever reason. So it's like, okay, that's one thing. And then like harmony, obviously, like, 1 4 5, the tonic, subdominant, dominant, like that exists everywhere. But then, dominance, like the blues sound exists so very much in R&B, which goes through like rock and roll and like, then you listening to someone like Ray Charles that like blends a whole bunch of like Louis Jordan influences, but at the same time, like he's blending gospel music, which is the flip side of like soul music, you know what I mean? And, or sorry, the blues, which is like the coin itself is soul. And it's like, that's what my show is. So I have topics where I talk about people and like, you know, how is this related? Like the last show I did was about blueprints, or like an early show I talked about sampling. So if you're listening to I Wish by Skilo from like the 90s, I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl I can call, right? So like you talk about that, and like that sample is like a 10-second, maybe 8-second thing from like Bernard Wright's Nard album and the song is called Spinnin', and it's just like it's faster and it sounds awesome in context. And he's like the son of Roberta Flack, and like she wrote really good tunes, and like, but anyway, but that if you're thinking at it from a physical element, physical level, the technology saved jazz, and like they're able to sample this thing and like slow it down, put some heavier beats on it, something that's more modern, but at the same time you have all this harmonic information. So all of a sudden, like any layers that you're putting on top of it, like, you're using the blueprint of the sample, which is like tied to this bigger construct of like Herbie Hancock, or Gerhard, I can't remember, what's that German musicologist name? I can't remember. But these harmonic theories that just like you're taking these non-diatonic chords, 1 flat 6, 4 minor, 4 major, to flat 2 major, and like you're creating this thing, but that's already there, but they don't know what it's called, but they understand this sound. It's familiar. It's from their father, like it's from their parents. Like that's what the show is. That's really all it is. And I A/B it. Like yesterday, I was A/B-ing, where it's from, what it is, and how they can create like this new original thing. And that's in a micro sense, that's the show, right? Like
That is so much fun. A-Bean is so fun. I know I did that with I won't say the name of the song, but it was a CeeLo Green song, and then the OJs. I don't know if you've ever done Love Train, and then the CeeLo Green. And you A/B it, and just everyone's like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, of course." So I was always saying to students, like, get a good record collection, like, like dive into the past and find inspiration. Like that is creativity. You steal pieces of the past and you infuse it with modern lens, and it moves us forward. And it's just, and nothing is in a vacuum. It's not like this whole genius myth of like someone just wakes up one day and is amazing. It's like we are all a product of we're all standing on the shoulders of everything that came before.
Exactly.
That lights us up. And I would say too, like anything that lights you up, like pay attention to that. Like pay attention when you're like, "Woo, I'm loving that," something that draws you in, because that's intel, So
like the Spice Girls.
Like the Spice
right, Thomas?
Girls,
like
right?
the Spice Girls.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. I've come to realize the beauty of video game music, because my son's into video games.
Yes.
And I have all these students who are like really into like Zelda soundtrack and Mario And they're like, you need to check this out. At first I was like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, those are some changes. Like, that's actually really beautiful. That melody is absolutely gorgeous. And you're realizing, like, when you open yourself up to possibilities, just listen without your like lens of what's good and bad and whatever, and just stay open like a curious person. Put your curious learner hat on. There is such beauty everywhere, and you'll start, as you're helping us through your all your work, finding those connective tissues between something you might like now and what has what it is inspired by, or it is resting on, you know, or infused in by, or whatever. Anyway, but the thing is, Thomas, we need guides like you. We need guides like you to help us start to notice these things ourselves, but also show us the excitement and the beauty of it, of doing that. Of course, wrapped in a round of just like highlighting and amplifying music and musicians who haven't always been given the platforms they deserve. And that's, I think, a really important part of the story right now too. So that is excellent. So everybody needs to go listen to the Jazz Gene every single week and donate to Jazzcast.
Yes.
To help sponsor. You know,
we put the link in the chat, so you can go check out Jazzcast.ca. When does it air? It's Saturdays 4 to 5. I know that, right?
Saturdays 4 to 5, and it re-airs on Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. EST.
Okay.
Ooh, that's a good time.
Check it out this Tuesday. I was listening yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. There was some great A-Bing of some fantastic tunes. So
we should probably do our speed round. What do you think, Amanda?
I know. I can't believe it's been an hour. This felt like 2 minutes. It's been so fun chatting with you, Thomas. So thank you for joining us. So these are our speed round questions.
Sure.
We try to keep them speedy. It doesn't always work, but we're gonna try. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Question 1. What's your favorite venue to play in?
The Canadian Opera House, the one on Queen Street.
Oh,
nice.
Okay.
The piano is beautiful.
Amazing.
So what's your preferred time of day to get creative?
Early afternoon, so like between 12 and 3. But then inspiration hits usually really late at night, so I don't know. But if I could be awake, it'd be between 12 and 3.
Amazing. So if you weren't a musician, what would you be interested in doing?
Cooking.
Oh.
I love cooking.
Speaking of, Jody.
Okay. So if you were to be able to invite someone over for dinner, living or dead, who would you invite, and what would you cook for them?
I think I would invite Will Smith. I don't know. He's big influence in my life. And like, I'd probably try to cook, if I could, a gumbo, because I've never done it before, and I'm sure he has stories.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Can I hang out at that meal? I love him too. He's huge in our house, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
Our final question is, what would be one bit of advice you would say to your 18-year-old self?
18-year-old self was really anxious to get better very fast. But this would be more of a reminder, because I know he would know, but it would just be like to tell young Thomas, everything's fine. Everything will work out. It always does.
Yeah. Totally. Amazing. Well, this was such an inspiring talk. Thank you so much for being here, Thomas.
Thanks for inviting me here. This is great. You both are so wonderful.
Well, it was so nice to finally get to know you a little bit, and we'll have to grab a beer and do it more informally. Do it again. For sure. Yeah. Amazing.
So thank you so much for joining us, everyone out there today. I hope you enjoyed this insightful conversation, and we'll definitely have to have you back to maybe talk about something more specific. Maybe once you launch your new course and talk about it, come back and talk about what your discoveries were in creating the course that you want to share. Like I said earlier, we really value what you're doing and the voice that you're bringing to music and to music education. And yay for Thomas. More Thomas in the world.
Absolutely. Well,
Thanks.
people are
Thanks for
saying
letting
thank
me
you
hear.
so much. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Thanks for being here,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks for
you, and
tuning in.
have a wonderful rest of the
Have an
weekend,
awesome
Thomas
day.
and everybody.
Yeah, you too.
And yeah, we'll see you next
And
time.
go check out Thomas's stuff and go listen to his show and actually get your
Yes.
students to too. That I think it would be a really
Yes.
informative
Definitely.
show to listen to for sure. All right, everybody,
Absolutely.
have an awesome day.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
Be well.